Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-commerce.
What's going on, Internet? Eric Banholtz here with Building an E-commerce Business. I've got a special guest, Taylor Holiday, on the other end. You may have heard us laughing. We are overcoming some internet and audio technical issues, which I am hopeful that we won't have any issues on this call. Taylor Holiday is the founder of, a billion things. If you go to his LinkedIn, there's like a list of a million things that all happened after he was a professional athlete. One of them that I think he's most known for is Common Thread Company, which is an ad agency that focuses on the e-commerce space. He's got some amazing clients, but not only is he an agency owner, he also has his own brands too through 4x400. These brands are Fielder's Choice Goods, Bamboo Earth, Slick Products, and he's got his fingers kind of in the weeds as well. And in addition to that, he's exited some businesses. So why don't you go ahead and give your little 30-second pitch, Taylor?
Yeah, that's good. Now I'll try and tie it all together for you. But we like to say that we live sort of exclusively in the consumer product e-com world, and even more specifically in the earlier stage. So $0 to $30 million consumer product e-com. That's our focus on the service side. That's everything we're doing in the agency. And it's primarily focused on helping people grow their business profitably. So that includes everything from paid acquisition to CRO to retention to creative production, basically anything that is required to help businesses sort of navigate that stage of business. And then we use the information from what we're learning on our own with our own brands, as you described, to sort of provide information transfer between the two sides to ensure that the ideas that we're recommending to our clients are born strictly out of the things that we're implementing with our own money and dollars. And we think it makes us uniquely empathetic to the journey of building a business, as well as have a deep understanding of sort of the economics of scale is the phrase that we like to use, because we really understand what goes into growing an e-commerce business from a cash flow standpoint, because we're doing it every day alongside of our clients. So it's been an really awesome, fun journey. We actually just closed on our fourth business yesterday. And by the time this comes out, that'll be good news. Jewelry brand called 31bits.com, which we're super excited about. So really just love this world, love everything that the internet enables in terms of commerce. And so we get to live it every day on two sides of the fence.
And there's so many things I want to know about that. Like how do you have enough focus to be able to run essentially there are 4 different businesses plus your agency plus online community. I mean, that's what is that?
Yeah.
Then 6 businesses that you're running.
Yeah, well, so the good news is I'm not, right? Is that the key to being able to build an ecosystem like that is great leaders. And so I have 0 day-to-day responsibility inside of 4x400. So Andrew Ferris is the CEO of that company. And I provide sort of like a chairman of the board type voice in that group. And we have sort of shared moments of partner collaboration. And obviously Andrew and I talk all the time, but the key to really being able to just like have this wide of a set of things is incredible leaders. So on the community side, Grant Zanini and Adrian Verheyen both lead that community. And what I have found is that like the way to amplify impact is to make it not about me at all, Eric. That's sort of the key to the thing, is that my day-to-day responsibility right now is the agency, and that's what I'm here to do. And I get to lean on a collection of awesome people to help build the rest of it.
That's cool. Now, from a structure standpoint, is like Common Thread the parent company and it owns all these companies, or are they like independent companies that are close?
So they're all owned by a holding company called Dream Labs. So Dream Labs is the sort of parent company to everything in our ecosystem. And there are other things in there. We have commercial real estate holdings and a culture development agency called Tell Me Your Dreams, and a small influencer marketing agency, but they're all owned by the parent company Dream Labs, which my partner Josh sort of is the only employee of, and he handles all of our legal and M&A and that sort of thing. So that's the holding company, that's the umbrella.
And now Common Thread is up to 50 plus employees, right? You guys are now like the legit, like you got to follow all the regulatory compliance stuff now, huh?
Yeah, we have crossed that threshold. Actually, last year I think was really when we hit that mark. But it's a lot of humans, a lot of unique opportunities, and it certainly transforms my job from the early days of when there was 3 of us in terms of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. But again, it's just the most empowering thing I think that I've experienced as a leader in growing these ecosystems is when you watch something that is sort of technically yours come to life and do rad things that you have nothing to do with. There's actually this really weird sort of feeling that comes with that. And I get to watch that now through the incredible people we have.
Well, let's move into kind of your bread and butter is the agency world and advertising. And I know Taylor through a couple ways. One way is we met at E-commerce Live, which is put on by Andrew Udarian, who I've had on the show before. And we've also been pretty actively engaging on Twitter. Now, if you're a Twitter user, I would highly recommend you follow Taylor. He's got a bunch of lists of people to follow, and he's kind of like one of the hubs of the e-commerce space on Twitter. And Twitter has become such an amazing e-commerce community. For me, I've really grown a lot and developed a lot of relationships on that platform. And I don't know, there's a little bit of a segue, but one of my mistakes I feel like in building Beard Brand was when we were getting obscene return on ad spend, like 5x return on ad spend on Facebook, 5 years ago. I didn't think that was good enough. And we like pulled off of Facebook altogether and kind of like, in hindsight's 2020, I probably wish I would have maybe tried to push that a little harder. What other mistakes are people making besides that giant one?
Well, yeah, it's so funny, man. That's the sentiment that anybody who was sort of running businesses in sort of 2016 and 17. And for us, that was when we were running Kalo. And we look back, Andrew and I, at we had that same feeling. It was like you were every day things were generating, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 1, whatever it was. And you're sort of going, all right, maybe we'll spend 20% more next month. And you didn't really have this sense of the moment that you're in. And that's really hard. It's really hard to be present in that and figure out how rare it is and what the opportunity represents. And I think in some ways, that's the situation we find ourselves in again now, which is that we are in this really bizarro world where we are surrounded by these sort of macroeconomic indicators that all say that the world is sort of collapsing around us, whether it's unemployment or whatever other indicator you're looking at from retail or et cetera, while simultaneously e-commerce is experiencing this massive growth. And for us, as an agency across all of our clients in virtually every category, April was just this crazy record month of revenue. And so as we think about that and we look forward and we think about, okay, what are the mistakes that people will make? They're sort of in that same spirit, which is like this sense by which you are unsure of what this moment is. And so you either pull back or you sort of hold your position. And the reality is these windows they open and shut. That's just the reality of it. And trying to figure out, and we like to ascribe to what we call best available truth, which is like, it's really hard to get all the inputs, but with the ones that we have, what's the best decision that we can make? And right now, there certainly are some indications that at least while we're in quarantine, there are some big opportunities for people to make a dent in the world as an e-commerce business.
Now, how are you making these dents? Like what from a technical standpoint, has it all moved to like video content? Like how are people engaging with their audience?
That's a good question. I don't know that there's an answer about the medium necessarily. I don't think that there's like something about this moment that's making video more impactful than static image or anything else. As much as it is, I think, a consideration about what you expect in terms of profitability in the short term. So even what you were describing, which was like Facebook wasn't good enough, I think what you mean by that was like the efficiency ratio relative to your profitability wasn't as good as you wanted it to be. And if you think about that, there's sort of a short-term view and a long-term view there, right? Which is that you could think about your profitability in June, you could think about it in July, or you could think about it in a larger window. And so what we're seeing for people is the opportunity right now is around demand creation and capture at a rate that isn't necessarily about profitability, it's about volume, right? So if you see what's happening, if you look at any of the sort of indicators around e-commerce's percentages of the retail pie, what you're getting is an influx of people that are suddenly using e-commerce. Now, for a while there was really suppressed CPMs, and there was actually like sort of a discount of purchase of advertising that was really about efficiency. And we were seeing some incredible efficiencies. But in a lot of ways, that window is already closed, and it's going to continue. We're actually going to see, I think, prices on ads go back up. That's sort of like a tangent we could go down. But right now, what's the opportunity is that the volume of available purchases is way up. So if you're a business, and especially I would say if you're a business who has a strong and healthy LTV, what I would encourage you to consider is the possibility of deferring some of the short-term profitability impact around real sort of market share or audience capture opportunities right now as people begin to come online in new ways. And that's what we're seeing for some of our businesses is we are seeing both efficiency and volume, but really what we're seeing is like people being able to take that same ROAS target that they were getting at 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1, and drive more volume through it than they were previously. I'd say that's more of the indication we're seeing. And it's not specific to any ad format or even channel. Although I will say that even diversification as a methodology, like we're seeing more people get volume profitably through YouTube and more search volume than they were getting before. So there are ways in which the sort of baseline expectations of the amount of ad dollars you could push through what we call like a pipe. So like if you think about every ad channel as a pipe that you could serve money through profitably, and there's sort of like a valve that controls how much you could get through it, we're seeing more dollars get through profitably at each advertising touch point than we were previously.
And I can echo those sentiments. We've seen a massive boost on the Beard brand side as well. One thing you mentioned was like if you have a good LTV, which yes. for the new listeners or people just dipping their toes into e-commerce, that's lifetime value, which means the total that a consumer is going to spend. Give a quick overhaul of how you're calculating lifetime value. Is it just looking back a year or 2 years, or is it looking back the entire lifetime of the company? And what is quote unquote a good one? Is it $100, $300?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. And I actually sort of have been sort of vehemently opposed to the term itself, because exactly what you just described is one of the problems with a term. I hate words that have subjective meaning. It's really not helpful for communication amongst us as human beings. And so when I say to you, Eric, what's your lifetime value? Well, that's going to reflect a length of your company's existence that's different than mine. So right from the start, when we use the term, we're not actually saying the same thing. So we have actually coined this phrase that we call cash multiplier, which is intended to mean your 60-day LTV. Because as e-commerce business owners, we have this sort of joke that we'll all die waiting for our LTV to show up. And the reality is what we need to understand is in windows and payback periods that we can actually afford to wait for, because cash flow is sort of king in e-commerce, what is the increase in value? And so we really help our clients to focus primarily on 30, 60, and 90-day windows with a real focus on that 60-day period. What we have seen for most e-commerce businesses, of course, there's always exceptions, is that for most e-commerce businesses, most of their secondary purchases happen within that 60-day window, almost regardless of product category. Now, you'd think that that's weird if you have a consumption length that's longer than that, but oftentimes the repeat purchase window doesn't actually reflect the consumption rate of the product. And so we really focus in on that 60-day window. And a general rule that we have for what is good is something we call the 30-100 principle, which is this idea that you want to see your LTV increase 30% within 60 days. So from average order value to 60-day value, you want to see a 30% increase, and then 100% within a year. If you have both of those markers, that's going to be an indication that you've really found an ongoing relationship with your customers that reflects sort of product market fit, if you will. And you're going to be able to really stack cohorts over time. They're going to really drive up the overall revenue of your business if you can do that.
So it's not so much based on a set like $100. It's more on a percentage basis for your products, because I would imagine
because everybody's going to be starting from a different point, right?
Right, like Quaylo's got to have like a $20 product, right? Their AOV's got to be like $30 or $40 or something.
Yes, exactly. So the Quaylo is sort of a good example where it's like their core SKU is $19.99. Their AOV is basically like 1.5 rings, so around $30, right? So starting from that point, what you'd want to see is it get to $39 within 60 days.
And then in a year, you're at $60.
Exactly. Yep. And obviously there's differences, right? Especially if you run a subscription business, the likelihood is that your CAC against your initial AOV is going to be a little bit more upside down than it would be for Kalo as an example, where they're actually profitable on the first order. So that increase in LTV just represents additional margin of profit. If you're actually sort of prospecting in a way where you actually lose money on the initial order, then you might want to see a larger increase than that. So we see that a lot in like beverage or subscription businesses where you're prospecting at break even or even a slight loss. And then you want to see that increase in value be more aggressive than that 30 and 100. So that's where it's like, you really just have to know your business. But what I would really encourage people to grab hold of is just their customer values by different cohort types. So by first product purchased, by offer, however they came into your business, look at their value over different periods of time. So 30, 60, 90, 120 days, all the way out as far as you can, rather than just looking at an LTV number, because LTV as a single metric is really, really not helpful, especially if you're a business that's growing quickly. Because if you think about just an average LTV, it's going to be so weighted by your newest customer acquisition data that it's actually going to, like, we have a business, a skincare brand called Bamboo Earth that's growing like crazy. And if we pull up, like, we have Glue as a analytics software that we use. And if you look at the LTV number in there, the graph would show you that it's like substantially decreasing, like in this crazy aggressive rate. But the reality is it's just an average calculation. And because the newest cohort is so weighted, it hasn't really caught up yet. And so it would be really deceptive to us to look at that number and go, oh no, our customer value is decreasing so substantially, but that's not actually what's happening.
What about that attribution world? Like, how are you making sure attribution is accurate and healthy to your organization? And like the challenge we've had is, we buy a bunch of stuff on Facebook, then they come in through Google or search or direct or whatever, and just having confidence that what you're spending money on is actually performing the way it should be performing.
Yeah, totally. This is the biggest question, right? With the most complex answer. What I'll say is that because we deal primarily in earlier stage businesses, the less diverse your media mix is, the easier this problem is to solve. This problem gets really hard when you have a really broad media mix and you're in podcasts and radio and TV and billboards and print and everything else. But when you are just digital, it's actually, I think, fairly simple to solve. And the key is to understand what each position in the funnel of your advertising is there to serve, and ensuring that you're not convoluting the waters by really being great about exclusions. So what I mean by that is, let's just use a specific example. So our company, FC Goods, we sell leather wallets, right? And our media mix is fairly simple. We use Facebook, we use Google, a little bit of YouTube. And so the way that we'll set this up is we'll define each stage really clearly. So we call prospecting basically any outreach to new customers. So we'll exclude all of our existing customers, and we'll exclude everybody who's been to the website in the last 30 days. So what we know from the start in that ad set in Facebook is that we are going out to reach out to people who have not been to our website and have never bought a product from us. So we know that this is pure new customer acquisition. And so we can feel really confident that, especially if we look on a 28-day click basis, which is sort of our default view at the prospecting level. Andrew and I will have a little bit of debate about this, because I actually don't mind the one-day view in Facebook that they use as the default for prospecting only. But if you want to be conservative, if you look just on a click basis, then what we know for sure is that somebody who has never been to our website, or at least hasn't been in the last 30 days and has never bought a product from us, clicked on my ad and went to the website. You can feel really strong about that as an indication of demand generation. Now, whether that purchase ends up in Google Analytics getting assigned to, organic search or direct or a paid search ad is sort of, I don't care, because in terms of attribution, I am less concerned about where demand capture happens and where demand generation happens. Like, where did the initial impetus for the purchase begin? So really, we find that the strongest indication of that is good, clean prospecting on Facebook with exclusions in place. And then as you move down the funnel along the way, and then when we think about an ad product like branded search as an example, we actually do not care about what the reported attribution is for that at all. It's actually not important to us one bit. It's not why that ad unit exists for us. It's basically a hole that plugs up our funnel and ensures that we are capturing as much of the demand creation as that we possibly can. And it's especially important if you sell to other online retailers or you're on Amazon and you're essentially competing over your own branded terms. If you're not, then it's a far less important ad product. And so you just have to think about what each ad unit intends to serve. And then as you move down the funnel, so that's prospecting. So as we get to remarketing on Facebook, then we'll actually tighten the attribution window. So we'll move from a 28-day click to a 7-day click. And then at the very bottom of the funnel, when you get to like abandoned cart or PDP viewers, we'll look at it only on a 1-day click basis. Because where it really gets noisy is when you start allowing view attribution to be sort of cross-pollinating between your different ad channels. And then another really important thing is a lot of people will love to advertise to their existing customers. We don't believe in using ad dollars to market to existing customers, primarily because the whole point of Facebook is the ability to siphon an audience off of Facebook into a channel that you own and control and can advertise to for free. So when a customer is in an active window, let's call it, if the average time period for a repeat purchase is 70 days, like we will hard exclude that group from any paid media dollars and communicate exclusively with them in email, chat, organic social, anywhere where it's free to advertise to them. We don't want to pay for that second purchase, especially when we're using LTV calculations. Like you start to create a really muddied water if you're paying for that second purchase again. And that's also where you'll see the most noise in Facebook advertising is like, you'll see people that are advertising to their existing customers and they'll see these massive ROASs that are sort of inflating the entirety of the account, but it's almost all view attribution that comes from the combination of their email and advertising creating a mess. So you just really got to siphon it and break it apart. But when the media mix is simple, you can be pretty confident that the demand creation around true prospecting channels like Facebook and even categorical search really do our new demand generation and creation.
I want to kind of take that to segue. Like we had really good experience or really good return on ad spend. And I think a lot of it was because we were remarketing to existing customers. Now, what about the idea of you have a new product launch? Does it make sense to then re-engage with your audience, or is that still going to be through your email, social channels?
Thank you for teeing up the perfect question. So what we do on a new product launch or even a big sale or moment, what we'll do is, let's say we have an email scheduled to go out. And if you look in Klaviyo or whatever email ESP you use, you'll see that when you send an email, there's generally a life cycle where the value gets created. And it's somewhere around like 14 hours. So if you send an email within 14 hours, most of the revenue that's going to happen has happened. So what we'll do is, let's say we've got Born Primitive and they're launching their new product, their new fitness line. And we'll send the email at, let's say it's 8 p.m. Eastern time on a Tuesday. Okay. We then will not turn on ads until 14 hours after that email has been sent. So what we're doing is we're allowing the email to collect all of the impact that it can for free. And then after that window has closed, now we will turn on Facebook ads to existing customers. So basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to pick up where the email left off and avoid any cross attribution between the impact of each channel. And so basically we're saying, hey, the email did its job. It ran its course. It's not going to pick up any more revenue. Now we want to go out and get as many of those existing customers to see this opportunity as we can. And we can trust that that impact is now happening in this specific channel. So just by coordinating the impact of going, hey, let's not pay for something we can get for free and waiting till that window closes. Now we can go out and sort of take our ad and go grab as many more people as we possibly can.
Now, I've worked with some really brilliant ad guys, but we weren't successful. And I put the blame solely on us as a company for really not focusing on the right things. When you work with partners, what are the best habits of successful companies that you work with? What are they doing? How are they supporting you guys?
That is another great question, Eric. The answer to that reflects sort of your genuine character, which is that the idea is that it's partnership. One of the things that will happen is that a lot of times there can become this tension over who came up with the idea, and the entrepreneur or the people on this side will actually be frustrated if they're the ones that come up with an idea. But the best relationships we have are truly collaborative, where we are bringing ideas, they're bringing ideas, and there's not an attempt to figure out like who created the value as much as the value got created, and we're after the same thing. And there's also a real submission to letting the data rule within the boundaries of brand and all those other things that are super important to people. But it's really hard. David Ogilvy has this great quote that I love that says, "Don't hire a dog and bark too," which is this idea that if you're going to hire somebody to be an expert in an area, you give them freedom to execute against ideas, even if you sort of have a general sense that it might not work. It's really important for people to feel empowered that way. So our best partners, one, they empower us, they believe in us, they're incredibly affirming. They actually feel like they genuinely care if our agency succeeds as much as if their business succeeds. And they are also willing to give direct, candid feedback. That's another thing, right? Which is that oftentimes what will happen is someone gets dissatisfied with a vendor or partner and they just move on and go forward. And my partner Jordan had this great quote. He played 8 years in the NFL. He played for 5 different teams. And he said the only coach he couldn't play for was the one that told him great job all throughout training camp and then asked for his playbook at the end of it. And we feel that same way, which is that we're not going to be perfect, but if you care enough about us to afford us the opportunity to improve when we make a mistake, then things can really work well. And we have this client, Bondi Boost. They're an amazing Australian company that is now rolling out to the US. And recently their founder, his name's Gabriel, called me and gave me very candid feedback about his disappointment in the service he was receiving. And he did it in a way that I felt like he was for me and he wanted to offer me the chance to improve it. And we've gotten that back on track and it's been incredible. And the reality is, just like any relationship, a marriage, a friendship, or whatever it might be, it requires that you do the research to trust that you found an expert you believe in, and then you invest in the relationship in both directions. And the clients that do that, we have long-standing, really freaking awesome relationships with. But when you find those people that are sort of hopping from agency to agency into agency, they end up in a place where they're not willing to put in the work to make it work. And that tends to be really challenging.
Yeah, I think that was probably our issue. Was we handed it on to them and said, hey man, you got free reign with it, without giving them really the support and guidance they need. Like, how frequently are you meeting with your clients, and what are those meetings look like? How are you discussing? How's it creative being made?
Yeah, all good questions. So the rhythm we have right now is every client, when they start, we set them up on Slack so that we work in what we call growth teams. So every client is assigned to a 6-person team that's led by a growth guide. That's sort of our senior level strategist position at CTC. And that becomes their primary point of contact. And then they have a creative strategist who's their creative point of contact. So really 2 people that will interface with clients on our side. And they're set up on Slack. They have a weekly phone call. We also ask that our growth guides place an additional just outreach call one other time throughout the week. So that's the primary method of communication, is Slack for real time, and then phone calls once a week to review, sort of almost like set the sprint for the week of what we're going to be working on, review data and progress and that sort of thing. Creative, we take on all responsibility for creative. So as part of our interaction, we have a full studio on site that allows us to do production work. So we basically, part of our agreements is we'll do any production work that doesn't require talent. So anything we can do with the product in our studio, we will do. And then we'll also do asset manipulation. So editing of any of your existing ad library. So After Effects, animations, graphics, that sort of thing from your existing ad library. And every client's different. Some client, their base skill is creative. And so they're providing us a ton of great assets and we're working within those. Some clients have no creative capacity and we're handling all of it. It really differs depending on who the people are on their side. And that's how we think it should be, is that there's no obligation that we have to be the creative. If that's your core skill set, then awesome. And provide us great assets and we'll rock and roll. If you need us to be that partner for you, we can take that on as well. So that's sort of the rhythm. But man, one of the things that I'm trying to wrestle with right now is, what is the right healthy rhythm for communication? So that's something we're thinking a lot about, because drawing boundaries and lines in agency and communication and healthy workflow is certainly a topic that we are thinking a lot about. So I'm not sure that we've got it exactly right. I think we probably have created a culture where our people are so eager to win for their clients that we actually create an unhealthy communication relationship, I think, more often than I would like us to. I don't actually think it serves either side. So we're working a ton on that to try and think through it, but it's a hard problem because you want to provide great service in a way that's healthy to your people, and finding those lines is certainly a challenge.
I would imagine that a lot of your clients are at a higher ad spend to be able to afford these kind of services, because I know creating media is not a inexpensive thing. What kind of spend are people doing? And then if they're on the newer stage of their business, like how do they get established and grow in their ad spend?
So we like to think of it as sort of the threshold is more about revenue. So on the growth agency side, so if you're going to be a CTC growth team client, you're usually somewhere north of $2 million a year in revenue, which when we think about that calculates to somewhere around $30,000 to $50,000 a month in spend. So that's sort of the entry point into the agency system. But to help folks earlier stage than that, we created a community that we call Admission. And that's really intended to be a coaching, training, and teaching platform. Because the reality is the economics of hiring an agency or even a freelancer when you are spending $5,000 to $10,000 to $15,000 a month really don't make sense. So if you think about just from a percentage of ad spend basis, which is how a lot of agencies bill, the big businesses win partially because they create economies of scale for themselves where they can get an agency partner to charge 4% of ad spend. But if you're somebody who's out there and you're spending $10,000 a month and you're paying somebody $2,500 a month, that means that basically you're getting charged a 25% markup on your media. It's going to be really hard to be profitable. So we think in the early stages, the best thing we can offer people is actually coaching to learn and do it themselves, or have an internal employee that can do it. So we have an awesome community of about 250 plus entrepreneurs now that are all earlier stage founders that are learning and walking together through how to manage their own ad account in hopes that they can grow someday to be able to be a client, but also just have the chance to learn. Because I think when you go to hire an agency, it's also really helpful to have a base level understanding of the mechanisms and platforms to be able to evaluate people. So that community is sort of the entry point for earlier stage businesses, and it's youradmission.co. And we love that world. It's actually like we find ourselves getting sucked into disproportionately spending time there. Sometimes we have to pull back out because it's so cool to feel the immediate impact of that early stage business and the changes that you can make in people's lives there.
I think from my perspective, one of the most amazing things about really growing your business through ad spend or advertising, online advertising, is the amount of energy that you need to put into it. It's a daily goal of seeing what ads are performing. Some will just like drop like a tank. You need to turn them off. And then the constant need to just continuously create new ads on new ads on new ads. So from my perspective, in the early days, it's like, oh yeah, you create these ads and they run forever, and then you just make money on that. But it's definitely like you need to be spending a copious amounts of time managing, growing, and focusing on it.
Yeah, and it's funny because unfortunately, it doesn't even end there. One of the things that we have really spent a lot of time on lately is more than just the ad, is also the landing page experience and even the post-purchase email flow that maps to it. And we ascribe to this idea that we call message mapping, which is this idea that the promise that you see in the ad is consistent with the one you see on the landing page, which is consistent with the unboxing experience, which is consistent with the post-purchase email flow. And it's really hard to do that because the amount of creative bandwidth that it requires, like I just ordered a sweater the other day from Everlane, and this is like one of the premier e-commerce businesses in the world, right? And I went on and I bought a sweater as a guy, and then I get to my post-purchase email flow and it's all women's product. And so it's really difficult and really time consuming and really requires a ton of creative output to be able to match that experience from the type of ad that you're running to a landing page that matches the value proposition to the post-purchase experience. But that's really the key to developing deep relationships with your customers, is to understand and creating an experience for them that has continuity.
Yeah, and I think about that from a strategic decision, the importance of focusing and prioritizing your channels before going wide. So like make sure to the best of your ability, you maximize the heck out of, Facebook or Google or whatever your ad platform is before you start to bring in these other variables. Like we talked about earlier in the attribution window, how the challenges can come about when you're doing podcasting and TV and radio and all that. Things start to get muddy. The same happens if you go too broad with your products, where you're serving men and now you're serving women. Well, how do you make sure that you have the marketing structure to be able to handle that? One last thing before we wrap it up. What is the biggest mistake that anyone could make out there when it comes to paid acquisition?
Yeah, it's funny. What you said is really triggering it for me. I have this sort of working blog that I'm working on. And the title is like, diversity is the siren song of death for early stage e-commerce businesses. And what you're just saying is exactly it, Eric, is that we tend to so deeply desire to see it work simply with a front end ROAS number that we can see be like, oh, that's working and winning. And we'll get caught in this loop of hearing all these stories about someone won on Snapchat or TikTok's working or these other things are like happening. And we'll end up just running around chasing one channel to the next. What I can tell you is that Facebook is the greatest advertising tool that's ever been invented in human history. Start there and work to make it work. Do all the things you just described. Make sure that the ad matches the landing page, matches the experience, make sure your abandoned cart's all in place. And as you build a foundation to execute against your core product in a core funnel, in the core place, then you can move on to the next layer. Maybe it's an additional product. Maybe it's an additional, audience type. But the key is really, as you move from channel to channel, you have to have a foundation to make that channel work. And if you aren't maximizing and creating efficacy within Facebook, the idea that suddenly Snapchat or TikTok or some other place is going to unlock for you this massive win is highly, highly unlikely. Now, there are moments of arbitrage in different places, but even if that does happen for you, it's only going to deceive you into thinking that the current structure is good enough for you to grow a business long term. And the reality is that we all wish it was easy as a silver bullet or the right headline or one ad away or whatever it might be. But great brands build a foundation of great experience for customers that make them stay forever. And I think the key is to really look at your advertising as part of a customer experience and make the whole thing magical. And then what you'll see is that your ROAS improves. And I'll give you a great example of this. So I mentioned earlier, client Born Primitive, and we have been working with them for 2 years, and they are an incredible brand. So they're primarily focused on the CrossFit space, and they make apparel that is born out of their own existence in that community and what they want. And forever, they've done really well. They've run it probably about a 4 to 5x on Facebook for years at a big spend. And that's probably an 85th percentile outcome for us on the platform. When COVID hit in March 16th or so was like their worst day in company history. And Bear, who's the founder, active military, called us and was like, shut everything down. The world is falling apart. He panicked, wanted to pull everything back. So we talked through it, and we got him to a place where it was like, no, we just need to think about how we message this. And he actually came up with this great idea about partnering the beverage company called O2 and doing a stimulus give back to local gyms. Okay. So he came up with this idea of how could we actually take a percentage of our proceeds and actually give back to all the gyms that were shutting down. He came up with this idea. We built this campaign around it, and we went live with it about a week later. So about March 23rd. And since March 23rd through the end of April, the ad account has run at 15x. And it's been the largest month in company history. And I tell this story to indicate one thing, which is that it wasn't an ad hack. It wasn't an optimization strategy. It was a genuine marketing offer that aligned with who his customer was, that transformed the outcome of his business. So as people try and go through the next lookalike stack and whether this targeting is right or the optimization strategy, what I can tell you is that what actually works to grow a business is to figure out how to do something that is so compelling that people can't help but be involved, and that will drive your ROAS in the ad account long term. And so as you hit moments of struggle or you run into a roadblock, before you run off and try the next ad hack, I would encourage you to really think about how unique your offer is to the customer and how much it aligns with who they are and what they care about. And that will transform your ad account.
Yeah, absolutely. Do the hard things that no one else is willing to do, or put the effort into. Dude, you've been dropping bombshells of information all podcast long. I could probably talk to you another 3 or 4 hours and keep this flow going, but we got to wrap it up here. Where can people get some more of this information, more insight? Where should they follow you?
Yeah, man. Like you said, we love the D2C Twitter community. I'm at Taylor Holiday on Twitter. I'm there probably too much, my wife would tell you. But other than that, commonthreadco.com is our website. Feel free to drop in and say hi there, or I would love to interact with you on Twitter.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on to the show, sharing all your insights. Definitely check them out. I've got a good friend, Patrick, with Supply. He works with you guys, highly recommends what you've done, and of course, all the information you've shared at conferences and online. You've done your fair share of helping out others. So check them out, Taylor.
Appreciate it, man.
Common Thread.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, man. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Cheers. Keep on growing.